You must go to this restaurant. You should go to this restaurant. You might want to go to this restaurant. 3 sentences, same incredible restaurant, and each one lands with a completely different force. Say the wrong one, and you could be sounding incredibly rude without even knowing it.
That's it, isn't it? One tiny word can flip a friendly suggestion into something that sounds almost like a command. It's all about the nuance.
Absolutely. I'm JD.
And I'm Hazel. And today we're peeling back the curtain on modal verbs. Those little powerhouses like could, would, should, might, must. They're the words native speakers use constantly to signal everything from the politest request to absolute certainty. And for learners, honestly, they're often where the most subtle yet crucial missteps happen. Last week we promised you one of the most underrated parts of English fluency, and I stand by that. Because everyone learns modal verbs in their very first English class, right? Can I go to the toilet? May I open the window? And then, that's kind of it.
That's kind of it. You get the absolute basics. And then nobody tells you that the difference between you must do this and you should do this is the Grand Canyon between a command and a suggestion. Or that I could help you sounds infinitely warmer and more natural than I can help you in most real conversations.
And if you listened to last week's episode on conditionals and the great was versus were debate,
Which I maintain was a very dignified debate, very scholarly.
it was extremely dignified. But if you were there, you already know that would is doing a lot of heavy lifting in English. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the whole family.
Right. So let's dive straight into something that trips people up constantly. The difference between must and should. Because they are not interchangeable, not even close. You can't just swap them out.
Okay, give me a scenario. Paint me a picture.
You're at work. Imagine your manager leans over your desk and says, "You should send that report by Friday."
Okay, that's a clear suggestion. A strong one, coming from a manager, so I'd probably do it. But there's still room to breathe, to negotiate, to ask for an extension. It's not an ironclad instruction.
Exactly. Now picture the same manager, same report, but this time they say, "You must send that report by Friday."
Oh, that's non-negotiable. That's an instruction. That's basically the boss saying, get this done or else. There is no wiggle room there at all. The air just went out of the room.
And here's where it gets really interesting for learners. In many languages, there might be one word for both concepts. So, learners sometimes use must when they really mean should. And suddenly, they sound much more demanding, much more forceful than they ever intended. They've accidentally issued a command.
I've definitely had this happen. Someone once told me, you must try the pasta at this place. And it was fine, because we were friends. There was warmth and enthusiasm in their voice. But in writing, in a text message, you must try this reads as quite intense, almost like an order.
In writing, it can sound almost like you're barking at someone. And when you're simply recommending something, a brilliant film, a hidden gem of a restaurant, a gripping book, you almost always want should, or even softer. You might want to.
You might want to try the pasta. That's lovely. That's casual and warm, like a friendly nudge.
You must try the pasta. That's a pasta emergency. That's me grabbing your arm and dragging you there, right now.
Which, to be fair, some pastas absolutely deserve that level of urgency. But the point stands. Now, let's talk about might and could, because these are the ones that I think are genuinely the most underrated, the secret weapons.
Completely agree. And this is the rehook I want to make right now, because we're only a few minutes in, and I already want to make sure you're tracking this. Could and might are not just the past versions of can and may. In modern, natural spoken English, they are the politeness workhorses. They do all the heavy lifting.
Okay, so here's the classic example. You want someone to pass the salt at the dinner table.
Pass the salt.
Rude, abrupt. Sounds like you're talking to a dog.
Can you pass the salt?
Acceptable, fine, A bit direct, maybe a touch impatient.
Could you pass the salt?
Polite, natural. That's what most British people would actually say. It's almost automatic.
Could you possibly pass the salt?
Now you're being very British. Slightly theatrical. I like it. A little flourish.
And this is the thing. Could you versus can you is a distinction that native speakers feel, even if we can't always articulate why. Can you is truly asking about ability. Are you physically capable of doing this? Could you is asking for help, more softly, more gently. It's an invitation, not an inquiry.
Right. Can you lift this heavy box? That's genuinely asking if you're physically capable. Could you lift this heavy box? That's asking you to do it, but nicely, with an implied please.
And the same logic applies to might. Might introduces uncertainty, but in a way that softens things, that makes you sound less dogmatic. I might be wrong is much more natural in British conversation than I am possibly wrong, or I am perhaps wrong. Those sound stiff.
I might be wrong, but wasn't the film made in 1987? That's so natural. That's the I'm going to disagree with you or correct you, but I'm going to do it gently, leaving room for me to be wrong construction. It saves face for everyone.
And it works the other way around too. If you want to suggest something without being pushy or bossy, you might want to check that again. You might want to call ahead. You might want to let her know first.
All of those feel genuinely helpful, not bossy. Whereas you should call ahead is slightly more direct, and you must call ahead is, again, approaching urgent, almost emergency territory.
So, we've got a spectrum. Might want to is the softest, the gentlest nudge. Could and should sit comfortably in the middle. Must and have to are the strongest, the firmest, and fluent English is largely about instinctively knowing which register you're in and picking the right one.
Now I want to talk about would, because would is its own universe, its own little galaxy of politeness.
Would is practically a language unto itself.
We touched on it in the conditionals episode. If I were you, I would. But outside of conditionals, would is doing something really specific in social English. It's making things warmer, more civilized.
I would like a coffee versus I want a coffee.
Huge difference. Massive. I want is perfectly fine among close friends, in your own home. But in a cafe, in a restaurant, in any slightly formal or public situation, I would like is just more pleasant for everyone. It's expected.
And it's not about being posh or snobby. It's purely about register. This is what native speakers learn, not in school, but just by being in the world. You instinctively match the formality of the situation. A cafe deserves I'd like. Your living room? I want tea. Can you make it?
Which is exactly what JD says to me every morning.
I say, could you possibly brew me a cup, my dearest? And you know it.
You say I'm gasping for a tea, and then look at me meaningfully with a single raised eyebrow.
That is a completely different conversational strategy, and it works very well. Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's do a quick quiz, because I think this is where it really lands. I'm going to give you a sentence, and I want you, the listener, to think about which version sounds more natural and appropriate for a British native speaker.
Ready, pencil poised.
First one, a colleague makes a suggestion in a meeting that you're not sure about. Do you say, that will not work? Or, that might not work?
And even just hearing those two, you can feel it, right? That will not work is almost confrontational. It slams the door shut. That might not work opens a conversation. It lets the other person respond without losing face, without feeling shot down.
British workplace culture, and honestly, most professional English-speaking environments, runs on might not, rather than will not. It sounds collaborative, not combative. It's much softer.
Second one.
You're writing an email asking a client for a document. Do you write, send me the contract by Monday? Or, could you send the contract over by Monday?
Could you send the contract over? The word over There does a nice job too. It sounds very natural and conversational. But yes, could you is the professional choice. Send me is direct to the point of being abrupt in an email. It's almost a text message.
And could you, with by Monday, leaves room. It feels like a request rather than a deadline ultimatum. It's much more gracious.
Third one, for must versus have to.
Oh, yes. Because these feel similar, but there's a really subtle, important difference.
So, must often comes from the speaker. From inside. I must remember to call Mum. That's a personal obligation. I'm reminding myself. I'm feeling that internal pressure.
Whereas have to often comes from outside. From an external rule, a situation, a boss. I have to submit this by Friday. That's the system, the job, the rule demanding it. It's imposed on you.
I must go to the gym. Personal resolution. My own desire to be healthier. I have to go to the gym. My doctor told me. My wife told me. The situation demands it. The external pressure.
I want the record to show I have never told JD he has to go to the gym.
She has looked at me meaningfully, though, with that raised eyebrow.
I support your lifestyle choices, deeply.
In any case, this must-have-to distinction is subtle. And in spoken English, especially casual spoken English, people blur it all the time. But in writing and in formal speech, it absolutely matters. It shows precision.
Now, let's get practical. Because we always want to give you actual phrases you can use straight away, that you can pick up and drop into conversation.
Yes. So here are 6 phrases, built entirely around modal verbs, that will immediately make your English sound more natural, more nuanced, and more fluent.
1. Could you possibly? This is British gold. It's a magic phrase. Could you possibly send me that file? Could you possibly move up a bit? It's polite, it's warm, it's even slightly self-deprecating in the nicest way. It makes people want to help you.
2. You might want to. Perfect for giving advice, without sounding like you know better than the other person. You might want to check the opening times first. You might want to mention it to her before the meeting. It's a gentle suggestion.
3. I should think. This is very British, slightly old-fashioned in a charming way, and means I believe, or I imagine. I should think they close at 6. I should think it'll take about an hour. It sounds thoughtful and considered.
4. That would be great, instead of that's fine or okay. It sounds genuinely warm and appreciative. Could you send that over? That would be great, thank you. It just lands better. It's a nicer response.
5. It might be worth. Perfect for suggestions, for brainstorming. It might be worth calling ahead. It might be worth having another look at that report. It's non-threatening, collaborative, natural. It invites discussion.
And 6. Would you mind if... For asking permission very politely, almost deferentially. Would you mind if I opened the window? Would you mind if we moved the meeting? It's super formal, but genuinely used, especially in British English, especially in office settings. It's incredibly courteous.
And notice that almost all of these use could, would, or might. The softer, more flexible modals. The stronger ones, must and will, are reserved for when you genuinely mean business, when there's no room for discussion.
Right. Which brings us to the weekly challenge.
Yes. This week's challenge is all about putting these subtle differences into practice. Imagine you're recommending your absolute favorite cafe to a friend. You want them to go, you genuinely think they'll love it, but you definitely don't want to sound bossy or demanding.
So, thinking about everything we've talked about today, which modal verb would you use? Would you say, you must go to this cafe? You should go to this cafe? Or, you might want to go to this cafe?
Think about the nuance, the feeling, the specific energy each one carries. And then, come and join the conversation on YouTube. Leave us a comment telling us your chosen phrase and why that specific modal verb feels the most natural and friendly for your recommendation.
We read every single comment. We do. And honestly, your questions and your insights shape what we cover. Today's topic came partly from you lot, asking about could versus can and when to use would.
So keep them coming. And if you know someone who's learning English, someone who's tired of sounding rude by accident, please share this episode with them. It genuinely makes a difference to a little channel like ours.
It really does. Every share helps someone find us, and every new listener makes the community richer, more vibrant.
Right. Quick recap before we go. Modal verbs are not interchangeable. Must is strong and comes from internal feeling or external authority. Should is a solid suggestion. Could and might are your politeness and softness tools, your secret weapons. Would warms everything up and lifts the register beautifully.
Use could you possibly and you might want to, and watch your English immediately feel more native, more natural.
And the must-have to distinction, personal obligation versus external rule, is subtle but definitely worth knowing.
Now, next week.
Next week, we're going somewhere that I know sounds incredibly dry when you say it out loud. But I promise you, JD and I both promise you, it is one of those things that native speakers notice immediately when it's wrong. It's the invisible glue of English.
Articles. A, an, the. The three shortest words in English, and also the ones that learners get wrong most consistently, and in ways that, frankly, sound quite strange, quite jarring, to native ears. We're going to untangle the mystery.
We're going to make the make sense. Finally,
That's next week on Mr. and Mrs. Oxford. Until then, keep practicing, keep making mistakes, and use could you possibly at least once today.
see you next week.